We'll be back from the break. It is time for us to continue with the SMB across borders, looking at the stories that are making headlines across the international scene, where we will look at stories from the East African Community Bloc, from our closest neighbors here, and as well as looking at those that are making headlines on the entire continent, before we also look at the global scene from the different continents across the world.
And speaking about East Africa, we kick-started with the uncertainty that is stalling progress to single currency deadline. And the East African Community member states are now nowhere near enacting crucial bills needed to implement the single currency regime that now the central bank is raising reservations on around 2024 deadline. Now, the reports had showed that they have learned the key bills include East African Financial Service Commission Bill, that is East African Surveillance, Compliance and Enforcement Bill 2022, and the EAC, that is Standardization, Accreditation and Conformity Assessment Bill of 2022, are yet to be acted on. And according to Kenya's State Department of East African Community Affairs, enactment of the EAC Surveillance and Enforcement Bill 2022, it is very critical in assessing the member states' compliance with macroeconomic convergence criteria. Now, mandatory requirements would be that they will help the regulatory monitor and enforcing adherence to the macroeconomic convergence criteria by the participating partner states. Kenya's principal secretary in the State Department of EAC Affairs, Kevin Diasia, told reports around there or journalists that the macroeconomic convergence criteria is one of the mandatory requirements that must be attained for establishment of the East African, that is East African Community or EAC Community Monetary Union. And the protocol for the establishment of the EMU provides for creation of 4 key institutions and 4 member states to attain, maintain and set for primary convergence criteria for at least 3 years before joining the bloc's planned single currency. Now, the institutions or the East African Monetary Institute, the East African Financial Service Commission, there is the East African Statistics Bureau and the East African Surveillance, Compliance and Enforcement Commission. According to the protocol, the East African Monetary Institute was supposed to have been up and running by 2015, while the other institutions were supposed to be operational in 2018. Now, the EAC heads of state assented to the bill establishment around the EMI on February 1st, 2019 in Arusha, Tanzania, and the Council for Ministers designated 1st July 2021 as a date for coming up being for the EMI, and that the members must comply with the debt gross domestic product ratio for around 50% physical deficit, that is including grants of 3% of the GDP, overall inflation of 8% and forex reserves of 4.5 months of import cover. Just to highlight more on this one, the single currency regime is the third pillar of the East African Community region integration process of progress after the customs union, the common market and the political federation being the last. And as we conclude on this one, last week East African Central Bank casted a shadow of doubt over the proposed implementation of a single currency regime by the year 2024, citing delays by member countries in releasing targets set for the monetary union roadmap. But the single currency regime is expected to eliminate transaction costs of exchanging currencies and removing exchange rate volatility in cross-border trading activities. That the banking regulators through the East African Community Monetary Affairs Committee noted that while significant progress has been made towards realization of a monetary union, several challenges could still impede timely implementation of its protocol. Joram Postonko was speaking about the East African currency that is now going to be facing delays, like earlier on reports had indicated its implementation. But according to the agreements of the bill 2022, they are highlighting some of bukwakulizo, some of the agreements that member state countries have not fulfilled yet, and they seem now to be maybe on pressure. That is why they are going to be, or there is going to be delays, like earlier on, like earlier on we expected, you know, the currency, everyone was excited about it, but the East African Monetary Institute is highlighting there are going to be delays. Number one, why? Because the EMI was supposed to be running around 2015, which was not. And other partners, like the EMI on February, just to highlight here, other ones were supposed to be active around 2018, which were not being active, like the Federation there of the African Statistics Bureau and the East African Surveillance, they were not being active. And now, after 2021, the pressure now 2022, everyone is excited about the currency, but we seem not to be prepared or ready to get there. And I'm concerned that this is the reason as to why, or partly as well, the reason as to why there is increased prices, there is inflation, there is price fluctuation around East African communities. You know why? Everyone is trying to beat up their debt. Every country is trying to have their taxes on goal, trying to have their public debt set at least on a certain percentage, because some of the highlights here is that a member state country has to have a percentage where their public debt is, or even where how their taxes is, or even a 3% increase of their GDP away from the initial one. So you can see that pressure is being reflected on countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, among others. You realize there is food, commodity prices everywhere around those particular countries. And from the quotes that are being highlighted, recent addresses, you realize the president, both president and the Honorable Minister Nabanja, advising the public that if you please see prices are high, try to find any other means, because as a country we need to still pay off debts, we need to integrate taxation, so try other means. And
it's actually very true when you look at that. Almost all the governments are trying to beat out their debts. And,
it's because of the East African currency, partly.
But anyway, with the East African currency, I do believe it will help us beat some of these challenges that we've been facing, the single currency, and also the issue of weaker currency. Maybe you would say this one is performing poorly, this one is performing greatly. So we shall have one that will be merging all the six of the East African community.
That would
countries.
be the greatest, I can say, but for now we still suffer with our inflations and price skyrocketing.
Now let's head to the other report that is actually coming in out here, as we are looking at the World Bank's Africa Gender Innovation Lab, whereby women got short end of startup stick, according to the reports that are coming in. Not more than 97%, when you look at that, more than 97% of investments made in two African startups between 2013 and 2021 went to male-led startups, with female techpreneurs in the continent being less likely to be pitched for equity financing. A report titled "In Search of Equity: Exploring Africa's Gender Gap in Starting Up Financing," prepared in collaboration with the World Bank's Africa Gender Innovation Lab and Brita Bridges, found major disparities between male and female-owned startups in Africa. The survey indicates that there has been a disproportionate funding of female-led African startups, where the funding deals have taken place between 2013 and 2021. Only 3% of all the billions invested into African startups went to female-owned startups. On the flip side, though, 76% of the total funding during the 8-year period went to startups led by all-male teams. Dario Guiliani, founder of Brita of Brita Bridges, a research and intelligence company focused on underserved markets in Africa and Europe, and came out and said that female techpreneurs and tech startup founders are noticeably fewer in sectors like the fintech space that is known to attract the most investment across the world. During Nation Digital Summit in Mombasa, organized by Nation Media Group, that was held in Nairobi this very month, that was held in Mombasa this very month in Kenya, Well Akinyemi said despite increase in tech startups, most women are disadvantaged due to lack of funding and inadequate knowledge of the technical know-how. When you look at this, Dr. Akinyemi stressed the need to embrace women and the youth in organizational decision-making process to bring change and adopt technology. When you look at the situations as well, many African organizations do not have youth in senior positions, which are critical in decision-making. Hence, those deciding on behalf of organization fear digitalization and hold back organizations, because according to the trend that is happening, it is better to have also the young people in those bigger offices, because at least they can adapt to the digital economy that we are heading into. Data from various sources shows that startups in Africa received a record-breaking over $4 billion in 2021, more than double the investments there were in 2020.
I agree with you. Let us have more young people embracing these particular organizations, because I mean, if we're just discussing about digitalization, discussing about technology, I mean, who is better well off than the youth about that particular knowledge? So you realize, for example, my father may not be into digitalization or technological innovations that are coming along. Okay, he might be in it, but the adoption pace at which he's going, to adopt something is going to be relatively at a lesser percentage than Joram Posonko being, at least taking part into that decision making of that particular entity or firm. You realize it's going to create a lot of digitalization, embracement of technology, innovation. I think I'm right. I'm
very
just
true.
mentioning.
Because when you look
at, like for example, my father, my soul rest in peace, would there are smartphones now. I see it with maybe my uncles or people in that age category. So just a smartphone. The smartphone is just for picking. He will just go maybe on, for example, online to answer a few. Doing business online here for a very long time, they find it a bit hectic for them. Number one, they're now highlighting, I've got sight problems. So you realize there are body changes that are also limiting them to be a part of digitalization. And Joram, you may agree or disagree, but when you put on a computer and between 50 years and 60 years, CEO is being put on a computer, the same computer.
There
is a difference. There is the way how you're going to just do your things on speed, whereas he's trying to tilt Galuvindi, trying to. So I agree. I mean, if we give.
So he's still learning.
Yes, if we give chance to young people, I mean, there is a lot that can improve, but also more so women. How can women tap onto those digital platforms? Let us always try to embrace the capacity, because women can do something that you might wonder about.
This is actually hitting hard on every working organization, whereby when you see looking at how the organizations are operating, and the reason as to why there will be some conflicts in one or the other is the age difference, whereby you would see those in top offices being too mature for the people they are leading downstairs, and when you're leading a more youthful organization, back to speed. So they know what is trending, and then for you accordingly, because you are still running your workplace in the other old format, you're going to clash. And after clashing and all that.
But there are some people who have, I appreciate, who have, tried to adjust with the generation. He's old, he's between 50 or 60, but understands and appreciates the generation changes that have come. And that kind of person, that kind of firm, that kind of organization,
and it's even
it
surprising.
Is way better
it doesn't actually go back to whether someone has actually attained this particular school or anything.
Yes.
But it depends on one's ability to actually work and change.
Very well. And speaking about that, we continue now to look out for what is more hurting in areas in Mozambique, where the tropical storms have hurt Mozambique areas. Since the beginning of this year, Mozambique, along the neighboring southern African countries, has been hit by cyclones, leaving the population in dire need for large-scale humanitarian aid. The cyclones have left the Maputo government concerned, especially since recent years. Mozambique has been hit by strong storms and cyclones this year. However, this has seen more 5 within short span for 2 months. One of the worst natural disasters to hit southern Africa in at least 2 decades happened in 2019 with cyclones that is around Idea and Kenneth, killing around at least 1,000 people in Mozambique. In 2021, tropical Chanlene storm, which passed through Madagascar and Zimbabwe, killed around 7 people in central Mozambique. But between January and February this year, cyclones Ana Bastaria, Dumaco and Amnati hitting Mozambique, and the fifth storm in Gombe hitting the country last week. Mozambique is one of the poorest countries in the world, with most of its population living on less than $1 a day. It ranks around 181st on the UN Human Development Index out of the 189 countries. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization attributed the global warming, and the surface of Indian Ocean has warmed faster than global average, which is forecasted to give rise to more cyclones and more droughts. Also, the World Bank's research found out that climate change and natural disasters may push as many as 132 million people into poverty by 2030, and causing around 216 million people to migrate internally by around 2050. Last week, Cyclone Gombe made a landfall in southern Africa, in Mozambique there. But as we conclude on this one, earlier on, the International Organization for Migration said that more than 115,000 people would be affected by the storm in Nampula and Zambezia province. The local authorities fearing the death toll around there being increasing day by day. But when you look at the chronic food insecurity exacerbated by climatic shocks and the natural disasters such as floods, droughts and cyclones, the USAID saying that according to the World Bank also, about a third of Mozambican lives and working in rural areas are mainly in the agricultural sector. But the climate change as the reason of the reasons for cyclones and droughts in the region. We're still speaking about hunger, we're talking about inflation, we're talking about skyrocketing of prices, and now we've got natural disasters that are hitting African countries. And speaking about Mozambique, over 115,000 people are said, to be looking forward for the worst when it comes to this particular season because of the natural disasters there, and highlighting this is going to be pushing a lot more people into poverty, and it is one of the poorest countries believed to leave people living under a $1. That is, if $1 around here is around 3,000 and below. So you can imagine Mozambique has got that population. 3,400. Yes, has got that population. And when we look at those natural calamities, natural disasters, where or how is it going to be surviving? So I call upon other African countries to combine hands and seriously help someone.
And when you look at that as well, Mozambique still suffering greatly from the different ideas of, let's say, natural calamities. Looking at scenes in the particular story there, you can clearly tell that it is tough times ahead for the people of Mozambique. And this is not happening for the very first time. It has always been seasonal and coming in every other decade in Mozambique. So this has hurt greatly their economy, and it's one of the reasons as to why on the African continent Mozambique is one of the poorest economies that are struggling greatly, and it can only be
being
attached to natural calamities.
The 181st out of the 189 countries.
So you can clearly see which place
to be poor.
out of the 189 countries in the world. Well, it being a Friday now, let's head to Tanzania, as our next story takes us to one of Tanzania's pop stars in Diamond Platnumz, who does not need to fly, who isn't supposed to fly out of the country unless he gets permission. And we're looking at the reason as to why this is so. The bongo flavor sensation Diamond Platnumz has launched a stinging attack on the Tanzanian government for always treating him like a villain, despite being one of the top taxpayers in the country's entertainment industry. The singer, who is currently on a media tour in his country to publicize his latest release, an EP dubbed FOA, First of All, claims artists under his Wasafi record label have always been humiliated and treated unfairly by the government of Tanzania. When you look at speaking to one of the media houses in Tanzania, where he's actually a major shareholder in Wasafi, Diamond claimed he can never leave the country freely like any other artist, at least not without an approval of the state agency in charge of music and arts, and that means it is under the National Arts Council. That is according to Diamond Platnumz. And when you look at the situation, that he says that whenever he asks for a reason, he's always told he must have a permit from the government before he can leave the country. To obtain the approval, Diamond says he's always forced to part ways with 50,000 Tanzanian shillings, which is $22, to pay to government to get a permit every time he's going to get a jet out of the country. He further claimed that he even has other issues, that when he's traveling on personal business, like going to see his children who live in South Africa, he first has to get this permit that goes for $22. In a rejoinder, Basata, through its acting CEO Matiko Moniko, denied Diamond his claim, insisting there can never be a specific law for an individual citizen. So that means all this is just Diamond Platnumz targeting media attention. Diamond went on to state that because of the mistreatment Wasafi has been receiving from the government agencies, he does not wish to be considered for any awards launched by COSATA in Tanzania. So he says his focus is to compete with artists outside Tanzania, and according to what he's actually facing different situations, the government does not consider him as a local Tanzanian artist because he has to pay lots and lots of money. And when it comes to traveling out of the country, a $22 permit has to be sealed by Diamond.
That is honestly limiting his reach, or even he's spending more on his travel bill if the country is imposing you on 2-year permit before you leave. But I pray for the best for Diamond Platnumz there. But moving on, we now look out for the war in Ukraine, as Biden brands Putin as a war criminal. Now the US President Joe Biden has labeled Russian leader Vladimir Putin as a war criminal in a move likely to escalate diplomatic tension or even further. Biden delivered the remark off the cuff in response to reporters' question at a White House, and it is the first time he has assured or used such language to condemn President Putin. And the White House later said that he was speaking from his heart there. And the exchange in Washington happened Wednesday, as a reporter asked the US president, after everything we have seen, "Are you ready to call Putin a war criminal?" The president replied there that no, before being challenged, and then he changed his reply, highlighting that, "Did you ask me whether I would tell or what I think?" He was a war criminal. But away from that, you realize that the president's official Twitter account there highlighted that Putin is inflicting appalling devastation and honor on Ukraine, bombing apartment buildings and maternity wards. These are atrocities. It is an outrage to the world. And after they're highlighting, after initially telling a reporter around there, he came back and reversed himself. If there had been any internal debate at the White House over how to handle the growing calls on the Congress and press to condemn Putin on his way there. But as we conclude on this one, this of course will make it harder for Biden and his administration to work with Russians going forward. Every concessions or negotiated agreements on whatever topic will invite the rejoinder there. But how can you associate with the criminals? So some of the highlights or some of the questions will always be unanswered if US is to deal with Russia, Russian people or Russian government. But perhaps and these comments was simply acknowledging the new reality that the world's political order is reconveniently shifted. There are no going back in these ways. And this comes after a busy day for political theater in both US and Russia over Ukraine.
Vladimir Putin, the Russian oligarchs, has actually come out also to greatly some of the Russian oligarchs, members of some of the Russian oligarchs are coming out to say what Putin is doing is not right. However, the president of Russia says this is to protect his people and he is not killing anyone, as the media is reporting. So we don't know what to take for the meantime. But what we do know, Russian agencies, media agencies are not operating on any of the search wares, regardless of whether you're on iOS or you're using your Google Play. You cannot get any, starting with the Russia Now, that is the RT News, Russia Today News. So with that, we do take...
I feel like we should just at least highlight on this Nipah virus for the public to know.
Well, before we actually do break off, there is a new virus here, a new virus VAX that has actually been developed by scientists. The scientists do develop the Nipah virus VAX that may give life-saving protection in just 3 days. And Nipah is a zoonotic virus transmitted from animals to humans, which can be spread through contaminated food or directly between humans on exposure to secretions. The virus had 3 outbreaks in India in the last 4 years and has so far claimed nearly 20 lives, including a 12-year-old boy from Kerala. So the new virus in here. And much like COVID infection, the Nipah virus spreads through respiratory droplets, but it is far more lethal, killing up to 3/4 of people it infects. It has also been listed for one of the viruses most likely to cause the next pandemic by the World Health Organization once it starts spreading heavily. So we need, you need to have information of all that before it does break out, before we head into that pandemic of that sort. At least when you have information of what may likely lead to that particular one. Well, with that, we do take a break, as when we do return, we have business tips, the business courts, and more SMB reports.